Hey, what's up folks, Jam Book Reviews here, and today I'll be reviewing Natives, Race and Class in the Ruins of Empire by Akala. Akala is a British recording artist, entrepreneur, author, and activist. He rose to prominence in the mid-2000s when his debut studio album, It's Not a Rumor, won him a MOBO Award for Best Hip Hop Act of 2006. He has since then released 5 more studio albums and several mixtapes. In 2009, he launched the Hip Hop Shakespeare Company, dedicated to improving youth literacy by using hip hop to teach them Shakespeare. Outside of music, he is known for his activism and public lectures, addressing topics like Black history and institutional racism, particularly in the UK. For his work, he has been awarded several honorary degrees, and in 2020 was listed as one of the 100 most influential Black Britons. Natives is his first non-fiction book published in 2018. Before I talk about its contents, I'll talk about the listening experience, as I got the audiobook. It was narrated by the author, which is a plus. If you've ever listened to his interviews or lectures, it's a similar delivery. An upbeat conversational tone, passing on a lot of information without sounding condescending or over the top. Because of the way he wrote the book, the story may seem non-linear, as he went on a lot of tangents to explain things. You'll find out why as I talk more about it. So what is Natives about? In this book, Akala tells us his life story of growing up as a mixed-race child from a working-class single-parent family in a country still grappling with the legacy of its colonial past. The reason it's called Natives, Race and Class in the Ruins of Empire, rather than Akala an autobiography, is because it goes way beyond that. In this book, Akala uses his story as a jumping-off point to examine the complex historical and social forces that shaped modern Britain, with a special focus on race and class, as these were the forces that shaped him as a British citizen, in his own words, a product of the empire and the welfare state. I'll use some examples from the book to illustrate his approach. The early chapters focus on his childhood in the 1980s, and he recounts his experiences in primary school, where he was bullied by some of his teachers and forced into special needs classes, despite the fact that he was a top-performing student. He then uses that to go into a broader discussion of how the British education system pulls back a lot of its students instead of helping them to reach their full potential, using statistical information to back up his arguments. Later on, he talks about the first time he was called a racial slur by another student, and also when his own white grandfather made negative comments about his skin color, going into the personal, how it affected his self-image and his relationship with his mother, and then uses that to go into the origins of racism and how the concept of quote-unquote whiteness developed historically. The book does not seek to demonize white Britain. Akala notes how poor whites like his grandfather are often used as scapegoats to mask the deeper structural racism perpetuated by the elites in their society. There's always nuance to his takes on the different issues, and he readily admits when he doesn't know enough about a topic to comment on it. In a later chapter, he talks about the first time he witnessed gang violence amongst his peers as a teenager, dissecting their motivations and so forth, and then uses that to go into the history of gang violence in the UK, its working class origins among groups like the Peaky Blinders in the 1800s, to the modern iterations of knife crimes and so-called black-on-black violence. And that's really the strength of his analysis, showing that nothing happens in a vacuum. Many of Britain's modern problems have identifiable antecedents if one looks at the history. On the biographical side, 2 things stood out to me that were essential to Akala's development: extracurricular education and travel. As I mentioned before, he had a lot of difficulties in the British education system, and one of the things that kept him from being crushed by it was a Pan-African Saturday school he was enrolled in. So while the mainstream teachers omitted or misrepresented anything concerning Black history, his Saturday school taught him about the Haitian Revolution and the Black Star Line. This was very important in instilling in him a drive for self-education, and also gave him the confidence to do well in the mainstream despite the setbacks. Being from a multicultural background, Akala had the opportunity in his youth to visit the homelands of his family. These trips were very important because they showed him as a child that everywhere was not like good old England. In his adult life, his career afforded him the opportunity to travel to far-flung places like the US, Brazil, and Australia, and seeing the way race and class functioned in all those societies gave him a broader perspective and understanding of the issues he discusses in his own country. Talking about his life brings me to where I think the book fell a bit short. Usually he struck a good balance between autobiography and discussion, but at times I wanted more on the biographical side. The perfect example is the chapter where he talked about the emergence of the British rap scene. He did a good job breaking down how it spread from the US to the UK, then developed into its own thing. But I would have wanted to hear more about his personal journey, developing his career, since he is a rapper by profession. So I think anyone expecting strict autobiography may be disappointed by that. But all things considered, it was a good book, very deep and well thought out. If you are a fan of the autobiographies of Frederick Douglass and Malcolm X, or even The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, it's very much in that tradition of addressing issues facing Black people in the writer's country, this time from a millennial and UK perspective, both of which I think are underrepresented. Thanks for listening, until next time.